stop for a moment. Not because something is wrong, but because something important just shifted. Somewhere inside you, there's a quiet awareness that has been observing everything for a long time. The conversations, the patterns, the repeated moments that slowly revealed what was really happening. And that part of you already knows what just occurred. You did something that many people never managed to do. You didn't explode when the pressure built. You didn't beg for understanding. You didn't deliver dramatic ultimatums or emotional speeches, hoping someone would finally hear you. Instead, you paid attention. You watched carefully. You started connecting the small details that most people overlook, the patterns that kept repeating, the moments that slowly showed you the truth of the situation. And instead of reacting in the heat of emotion, you did something much more difficult. You waited. You allowed yourself to gather clarity piece by piece until the picture became undeniable. And when the moment finally arrived, when you understood what needed to happen, you moved, quietly, deliberately, without chaos. From the outside, it may have looked simple, maybe even unremarkable. But what you did required a level of emotional discipline that most people never develop. Because the easier path would have been to react immediately, to fight, argue, defend, or demand change. But you chose something else. What you did wasn't revenge. It wasn't impulsive anger. It wasn't the kind of reaction that burns hot for a moment and then disappears. It was control. It was the ability to remain steady when everything around you encouraged you to lose that steadiness. It was the quiet strength of someone who understands that the most powerful moves are often the ones made without noise. And that is why this moment matters. Because the real story here is not just that you left a situation. The real story is what the process required of you. The patience, the observation, the emotional restraint, and the clarity it took to move when the time was finally right. That kind of composure doesn't happen by accident. It reveals the person you have quietly been becoming. There is a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. It describes what happens when someone doesn't simply recover from adversity, but restructures because of it. They emerge from difficulty with capacities they didn't possess before the experience reshaped them. Most conversations about this idea focus on what people gain: resilience, perspective, clarity. But there is another dimension that is rarely named directly: strategic emotional intelligence. This is the ability to observe a situation from within it, process what is happening in real time, and respond from deliberate design rather than reflexive reaction. You developed this ability, not because someone taught it to you, not because you discovered it in a book, though maybe books helped you understand it later. You developed it because the environment you were navigating didn't give you the luxury of falling apart in ways that would cost you everything. So something in you adapted. You began moving differently, slower, more deliberate, watching more than speaking, observing more than reacting. What others interpreted as withdrawal was actually intelligence gathering. What they read as distance was your nervous system learning to regulate rather than escalate. What looked like patience from the outside was something closer to precision, the accumulation of enough information that the truth became undeniable. Then, when the moment arrived, you executed your exit cleanly. that did not happen by accident. What you were navigating was not simply a person or even a conflict. It was a pattern, a system of relational dynamics that had their own momentum and their own logic. These systems recruit energy. They redirect attention. They pull people into cycles that slowly erode stability while presenting themselves as normal. Research in attachment theory and family system psychology shows that destructive relational patterns often sustain themselves through reinforcement loops, intermittent validation, manufactured urgency, emotional confusion. These patterns make exiting difficult. Every time you attempted to step away emotionally, the system recalibrated. It shifted tone. It introduced guilt. It offered temporary change just long enough to pull you back. A direct emotional exit rarely works against a system like that. Eventually, something in you recognized this. Instead of trying to escape through confrontation, you started building something internally. Clarity. You began examining the structure of the situation with quiet attention. And when the internal decision was finally made, when you knew you were done, you carried that knowledge silently. That was when the real shift happened. There is a useful concept to describe this process: emotional transmutation. It refers to the ability to take intense emotional experiences, grief, betrayal, exhaustion, and convert them into insight rather than reaction. Not suppressing the emotion, not discharging it onto someone else, but metabolizing it. You allowed yourself to feel what was happening. You did not minimize it. You did not deny the weight of it. Then you asked a different question. Not, how do I make this stop? Not, who is responsible? But, what is this showing me? What decision does this clarity make possible? That shift requires something rare. It requires the ability to remain aware of your emotions without being completely consumed by them. Psychological research on emotional regulation shows that people who maintain access to reasoning under emotional pressure are using advanced cognitive flexibility. Often this ability develops in environments where people had to learn early how to manage their internal world carefully. What begins as survival becomes skill, and that skill is what you deployed. From the outside, what people witnessed looked almost theatrical. You did not fight. You did not create a scene. You simply became unreachable. Not dramatically, gradually. The volume lowered. Availability decreased. Closeness stopped being performed long before physical presence ended. When the final moment came, you were already gone internally. What others witnessed was simply the visible conclusion of a process that had been unfolding quietly for weeks or months. Systems built on conflict expect resistance. They are designed to respond to confrontation. They are not designed to respond to calm detachment. Your composure gave them no script. The courtesy remained. The hostility never appeared. The distance increased slowly enough that the change was difficult to name. And when the exit happened, it was already complete. What you demonstrated was not superiority over anyone. The people who remain inside those patterns are often navigating the same cycles themselves. Many of them are responding to dynamics that were present long before you arrived. Habits of relating that have been repeated so many times, they feel normal. In many cases, they are not intentionally harmful. They simply never developed the awareness, the tools, or the distance required to see the pattern clearly enough to step outside of it. But what you did required something different. You stayed steady in an environment that was designed to pull you into reaction. While emotions were high, expectations were shifting, and the pressure around you kept trying to draw you back into the same cycle. You did something rare. You regulated yourself. You slowed down enough to observe what was actually happening, instead of responding to what it felt like in the moment. You looked honestly at the situation, without minimizing it and without exaggerating it. You allowed yourself to see the real cost it was having on you, the emotional energy, the time, the erosion of your clarity. And once you understood that cost, you made a decision that many people struggle to make. You acted, not impulsively, not dramatically, but deliberately. And that choice did more than simply remove you from a difficult situation. It interrupted a pattern. When someone steps out of a deeply ingrained relational dynamic, especially one that may have been repeating for years or even passed down across generations, the shift is not only personal, it changes the structure of the system itself. Family systems research shows that relational patterns often repeat through learned behaviors and stress responses. People inherit ways of communicating, reacting, and coping that were modeled long before they were aware of them. Over time, those patterns become templates that quietly shape relationships. Most people continue those cycles without realizing it. But every cycle eventually encounters someone who decides it will stop. Not with a speech, not with an announcement, but through behavior, through small, consistent decisions repeated quietly over time, until the structure of life no longer supports the old pattern. That is what you did. And the truth is, there is rarely recognition for something like that. There is no ceremony marking the moment you stepped out. Many of the people around you may never fully understand what it required or what it cost you internally. But the absence of an audience does not make the act smaller. If anything, it makes it more honest. Because what you did was not a performance designed to earn approval. It was not a transaction made with the expectation of reward. You did not leave in order to prove something, or to guarantee that the future would immediately become easier. What you did was something deeper. You chose authorship over repetition. You decided that the pattern would no longer write your story. And authorship does not promise outcomes. It gives you ownership. What matters most now is the capacity you built in the process. The ability to observe, to wait, to regulate, to choose response instead of reaction. Neuroscience research on neuroplasticity shows that repeated patterns of behavior reshape the brain. Every time you chose regulation over reaction, you reinforced that architecture. You were not only surviving the situation, you were building the mind you will carry into everything that comes next. The exit is complete, but what you built to accomplish it remains with you. Take a moment and recognize what you actually did, and then consider the real question that remains. What will you build next with a mind that has already proven it can remain steady in difficult conditions? Take a breath. Let yourself understand the significance of what you carried through. Then decide who you are becoming. This is the inner calling. I will see you in the next one.